Hello friends, and welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new here. My name is Elise, and this is my mystical bookshelf. And today I have an interesting take on a dark academia book, and I don't know how popular this will be. I'm kind of nervous to make it, but this is just how I feel. You don't have to necessarily agree with me, and I'm not saying that this is the right or the wrong take. This is just kind of how I read the book. And I mean, like I said, I'm trying to bring a Christian perspective to my channel, so I don't know, I'm going to do a spicy take on an education in Malice by whoever it's by. I can't remember who it's by. Oh my gosh. I checked it out on Libby like a couple days ago. Probably a week ago, I would say. But yeah, so I checked it out on Libby, and I saw that it was an audiobook, and I was like, oh, I'll give it a shot, because I've heard good things about An Education in Malice. And I went into it knowing that it was probably going to be one of the more unsavory books that I have read. Obviously, because it's like a Carmilla retelling, which is like sort of sapphic. And there's nothing wrong with that. I enjoy a good sapphic book from time to time. It's just not something that I always enjoy. I mean, I enjoy some of them, but it's not something that I always vie for picking up, because it's not my vibe usually. But I had heard good things about Education in Malice, so I figured, why not? Why shouldn't I read it? It was interesting. I really enjoyed the writing. The writing of this book was beautiful. I wish I could remember who it's by. I really wish I could remember who it's by. Maybe I will pause real quick and go look. So hold on. Okay, I'm back. I went to look at my Goodreads because I wanted to tell you who this is by. And I'll insert a picture of it too for this video, obviously. But, yeah, so this book, Education in Malice, is by T.S. Gibson. S.T. Gibson. Not T.S. S.T. Like Saint. Yeah, S.T. Gibson. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful writing. I can't deny that it's beautiful writing. I just thought some parts of it were a little bit unsavory for my taste. And, like, I went into it knowing that. I was like, you know, parts of this book probably are going to be weird. And they're probably going to make me uncomfortable. Just because of who I am and what I typically read. And this isn't what I typically read, but I was willing to give it a shot because I'm trying to have like an open mind, I guess, to certain books, even if they are a tad bit unsavory at times. And this book was definitely not for the faint of heart. It was pretty unsavory. Especially the one chapter where I was like, I knew it was coming, but like I forgot about it, and I was like, ooh, hold on. I had to like skip through it a little bit because I was just like, this is uncomfortable. Like, this is truly making me uncomfortable. And I don't know, you probably know what part of the book I'm talking about. I feel like I don't have to explicitly say it. But if you look at my Goodreads account is also under my name. It's under Elise's Mystical Bookshelf. You can read my review on it, and then you can see what I'm talking about, because I don't want to say it on YouTube, because I don't know if I can. Yeah. But you know what I'm talking about. It's unsavory, for sure. And I feel like it wasn't totally necessary to have that part in the book. But I guess, I mean, it's about vampires, so whatever, I guess. But that's not like what I'm talking about as a whole in this book. I think what I am talking about and what might be my spicy review on it, I gave it 2 stars, and I gave those 2 stars to Laura and Carmilla's relationship, because their relationship is beautiful, I can't deny that. And I really enjoyed the writing of S.T. Gibson. I feel like she has some really beautiful words, and she's really great at storytelling. But I feel like what was holding me back from giving it a higher review was the fact of Laura's constant battle with religion. And I think when I was reading it, when I was listening to it, I was like, okay, how can I articulate what I'm trying to say with this? And I think the best way that I can put it, and the way that I think most Christians would understand, is that Laura's character is being dismantled by temptation, and by the temptation of Laura, or not Laura, her name's Laura, by the temptation of Carmilla, and the darkness and that is exuding from Carmilla. And it is a character demantalization of sorts. It's a dismantling. That's what it feels like. A character dismantling of like someone who was super religious and prayed a lot and was faithful to God and was like, I'm praying, I'm going to confession and stuff like that. And then she kind of falls away from that and is sort of idolizing Carmilla and idolizing the feelings that she gets from Carmilla and idolizing their professor, who is the catalyst between them and their relationship, because it's very enemies to lovers, enemies to toxic lovers, I guess. Their relationship is very toxic with their professor. And it's kind of sad to read about with Carmilla being used by her professor. But it's also interesting to see Carmilla being saved by Laura, I guess, in a roundabout way, because Carmilla is drawn to Laura's lightness, whereas Laura is drawn to Carmilla's darkness. So I thought that was kind of interesting too. But the best way that I can explain how I felt about this book is that with Laura's dismantlement, it is evident that you can't serve two masters. That's what I got from this book. So like in the Catholic Bible, there's a verse, I think St. Paul says it, or I can't remember exactly. I'd have to open my Bible and like look at it. But it's like you can't serve two masters. You can't have one hand doing something in the light and the other hand doing something in the dark. And I think Laura understands that on a very spiritual, soulful level, because she ends up choosing the darkness over the light. And it is a very interesting take on dismantling her religious beliefs and dismantling her ideologies towards God, because she's Episcopalian and she goes to confession, she prays, she does all this, but she has sapphic tendencies and she ends up choosing that different pathway and different idol over her beliefs in God. And I thought the last line that she says was very interesting. It's no longer Laura the saint, it's Laura of the night, or something along those lines. I thought it was really interesting. And it's a very interesting portrayal of watching someone go from being one thing to being something completely different. And it's interesting to see Laura and Camilla's dynamic. Laura and Carmilla's dynamic, going from enemies to being egged on by their professor to becoming more than friends with one another, to exploring those different feelings with each other. And like I said, the writing's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to explore these types of feelings for someone. And I really just thought it was an interesting take on religion and the dark side of things. And it's definitely not a bad book, but I would not recommend it without going into it with the mindset of like, this is more unsavory and this isn't something that you should strive to understand fully, or like you shouldn't go into it with certain expectations. Because while it is kind of a retelling of Carmilla, I actually did listen to the original Carmilla. It seems like a very loose interpretation of Carmilla, but I thought it was interesting to bring dark academia vibes. And I also thought it was interesting to bring Episcopalian religious vibes to it too, because I really enjoyed listening to Laura grapple with certain things, and I enjoyed listening to Carmilla grapple with her professor and wanting to be with Laura, and it was just really interesting. It was an interesting, fresh perspective on that certain subject. But I really think it comes down to Laura can't have two masters, and she ends up choosing the more dark side versus what she had originally anticipated for herself. And it was really, I can't stop saying the word interesting, but it was a really good take on that certain aspect of ideology. And it wasn't saying anything super bad about religion, which I thought was good. It wasn't like bashing in any way. It was just like choosing certain lifestyles over something else that you didn't think you could choose for yourself. And I really thought that the writing was beautiful, and there was lots of good quotes in this book that I can't think of right now, but I did enjoy listening to it, even if some of the parts were a little bit like, that wasn't the best. But I mean, I understand why she put those parts in there, because it's very helpful in understanding the dynamic between Laura and Carmilla and their professor. And I also just thought it was interesting how Carmilla was choosing between her professor and Laura. It was very interesting to see Carmilla grapple with these two different women in her life, because it felt like Carmilla and Laura were like yin-yang type of thing. And I just felt really bad for Carmilla, because she felt like a useless toy with her professor. And I thought it was I just thought it was very endearing listening to her parts of the story and how she feels about Laura. And I was kind of cool to see her understand that her professor was using her and didn't really love her. But I also thought it was kind of cool how she got turned into a vampire. That was very dramatic. And those parts were kind of gross, but like I understand why those parts were put into the book, because it's very important to understand that type of lore of the vampirism of the original Carmilla, and the illusion that Carmilla is a vampire and actually did become a vampire in the Education in Malice. And I don't know, it's just very thought-provoking listening to this book. And I don't regret that I read it. I really don't, even though if some parts were kind of icky, made me feel icky. But overall, I think it was very thoughtful and an interesting take on Carmilla. And if you have listened to or read the original Carmilla, I would recommend reading An Education in Malice, because it's definitely got some good themes. And it has some thought-provoking instances where it makes you think, like, why am I reading this? Or what can I get out of this? Or why is it making me feel this way? And I don't know, it was an interesting take. It was very thoughtful, and I just wanted to talk about it. I wanted to give my thoughts on it. And I know this is kind of a shorter video for me, but that's really all I had to say about it. It's like, it was a dynamic between choosing one thing over choosing another thing, and how you can't have two masters. You have to make a decision for yourself and where you want your life to go. And obviously Laura made that decision in the end, and she dismantled her Laura the Saint persona in favor of wanting to be this new Laura of the Darkness. And that is totally her choice. That's her prerogative. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. That's just how I feel about it. And I just thought it was a very thoughtful, thought-provoking take. But if you have read Education in Malice, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, because I think it is very thought-provoking, and it's a very interesting book to read for sure, and I would totally recommend it. But I would definitely look at my Goodreads and look at the part that I'm talking about, and if you don't think that you can handle listening to that or reading it, maybe skip that part, because that's kind of what I did. I kind of skipped it, and I didn't really miss much from skipping it. I still understood what was going on. But yeah, so I don't know. That was an interesting dark side book of me to read. It's not something I normally read. I mean, I like dark academia, but it's not something I actively seek out most of the time, unless it sounds really alluring and intriguing, and this was definitely intriguing. But yeah, so thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and look at my Goodreads, and look at my Instagram if you want more content from me. And I appreciate your support and your willingness to listen to me blabber about books, because I really appreciate it. And I'll see you in the next video. So goodbye, friends!